"It is the sort of malady which we call monomania," said the doctor. "You had never anything to complain of?" said the governor to the jailer who had charge of the abbé. "Never, sir," replied the jailer, "never. On the contrary, he sometimes amused me very much by telling me stories. One day, too, when my wife was ill, he gave me a prescription which cured her." "Ah, ah," said the doctor, "I did not know that I had a rival, but I hope, Governor, that you will show him all proper respect." "Yes, yes, make your mind easy, he shall be decently interred in the newest sack we can find." "Will that satisfy you?" "Must this last formality take place in your presence, sir?" inquired a turnkey. "Certainly. But make haste, I cannot stay here all day." Other footsteps, going and coming, were now heard, and a moment afterwards the noise of rustling canvas reached Dante's ears, the bed creaked, and the heavy footfall of a man who lifts a weight sounded on the floor, then the bed again creaked under the weight deposited upon it. "This evening," said the governor. "Will there be any mass?" asked one of the attendants. "That is impossible," replied the governor. "The chaplain of the chateau came to me yesterday to beg for leave of absence, in order to take a trip to Hyères for a week." "I told him I would attend to the prisoners in his absence." If the poor abbé had not been in such a hurry, he might have had his requiem. "Pooh, pooh," said the doctor, with the impiety usual in persons of his profession, "he is a churchman. God will respect his profession, and not give the devil the wicked delight of sending him a priest." A shout of laughter followed this brutal jest. Meanwhile the operation of putting the body in the sack was going on. "This evening," said the governor, when the task was ended. "At what hour?" inquired a turnkey. "Why, about 10 or 11 o'clock." "Shall we watch by the corpse?" "Of what use would it be?" "Shut the dungeon as if he were alive, that is all." Then the steps retreated, and the voices died away in the distance, the noise of the door, with its creaking hinges and bolts ceased, and a silence more sombre than that of solitude ensued, the silence of death, which was all-pervasive, and struck its icy chill to the very soul of Dante's. Then he raised the flagstone cautiously with his head, and looked carefully around the chamber. It was empty, and Dantes emerged from the tunnel. Chapter 20. The Cemetery of the Château d'If. On the bed, at full length, and faintly illuminated by the pale light that came from the window, lay a sack of canvas, and under its rude folds was stretched a long and stiffened form. It was Faria's last winding sheet, a winding sheet which, as the turnkey said, cost so little. Everything was in readiness. A barrier had been placed between Dantes and his old friend. No longer could Edmund look into those wide-open eyes which had seemed to be penetrating the mysteries of death. No longer could he clasp the hand which had done so much to make his existence blessed. Faria, the beneficent and cheerful companion, with whom he was accustomed to live so intimately, no longer breathed. He seated himself on the edge of that terrible bed, and fell into melancholy and gloomy reverie. Alone, he was alone again. Again condemned to silence, again face to face with nothingness. Alone. Never again to see the face, never again to hear the voice of the only human being who united him to earth. Was not Faria's fate the better, after all, to solve the problem of life at its source, even at the risk of horrible suffering? The idea of suicide, which his friend had driven away and kept away by his cheerful presence, now hovered like a phantom over the abbé's dead body. If I could die, he said, I should go where he goes, and should assuredly find him again. But how to die? It is very easy, he went on with a smile. I will remain here, rush on the first person that opens the door, strangle him, and then they will guillotine me. But excessive grief is like a storm at sea, where the frail bark is tossed from the depths to the top of the wave. Dantes recoiled from the idea of so infamous a death, and passed suddenly from despair to an ardent desire for life and liberty. Die? Oh, no, he exclaimed, not die now, after having lived and suffered so long and so much. Die? Yes, had I died years ago, but now to die would be, indeed, to give way to the sarcasm of destiny. No, I want to live, I shall struggle to the very last, I will yet win back the happiness of which I have been deprived. Before I die I must not forget that I have my executioners to punish, and perhaps, too, who knows, some friends to reward. Yet they will forget me here, and I shall die in my dungeon like Faria. As he said this, he became silent and gazed straight before him like one overwhelmed with a strange and amazing thought. Suddenly he arose, lifted his hand to his brow as if his brain were giddy, paced twice or thrice round the dungeon, and then paused abruptly by the bed. Just God! He muttered, whence comes this thought? Is it from thee? Since none but the dead pass freely from this dungeon, let me take the place of the dead. Without giving himself time to reconsider his decision, and, indeed, that he might not allow his thoughts to be distracted from his desperate resolution, he bent over the appalling shroud, opened it with the knife which Faria had made, drew the corpse from the sack, and bore it along the tunnel to his own chamber, laid it on his couch, tied around its head the rag he wore at night around his own, covered it with his counterpane, once again kissed the ice-cold brow, and tried vainly to close the resisting eyes, which glared horribly, turned the head towards the wall, so that the jailer might, when he brought the evening meal, believe that he was asleep, as was his frequent custom, entered the tunnel again, drew the bed against the wall, returned to the other cell, took from the hiding place the needle and thread, flung off his rags, that they might feel only naked flesh beneath the coarse canvas, and getting inside the sack, placed himself in the posture in which the dead body had been laid, and sewed up the mouth of the sack from the inside. He would have been discovered by the beating of his heart, if by any mischance the jailers had entered at that moment. Dantes might have waited until the evening visit was over, but he was afraid that the governor would change his mind, and order the dead body to be removed earlier. In that case his last hope would have been destroyed. Now his plans were fully made, and this is what he intended to do. If while he was being carried out the gravediggers should discover that they were bearing a live instead of a dead body, Dantes did not intend to give them time to recognize him, but with a sudden cut of the knife, he meant to open the sack from top to bottom, and, profiting by their alarm, escape. If they tried to catch him, he would use his knife to better purpose. If they took him to the cemetery and laid him in a grave, he would allow himself to be covered with earth, and then, as it was night, the grave diggers could scarcely have turned their backs before he would have worked his way through the yielding soil and escaped. He hoped that the weight of earth would not be so great that he could not overcome it.